Welcome to another week on the Enneagram. Today we are going to be talking about the type 8, the challenger, and how it shows up under stress. If we have not met before, I am Dave Glaser. I live in Colorado. I'm an Enneagram coach, relationship coach, and personal trainer. But more importantly, I am an 8 on the Enneagram. I can speak to how the challenger shows up when they are under stress. And this week we are going to dig into the shadow and how the Enneagram type 8 shows up at their worst. So if you are a type 8 or you know somebody who is, send this video to them, share it with them, and stay until the end. Let's dig right in. So last week we talked about the wings of the Enneagram 8, and I'm fluid. I go between the 9 and the 8 and the 7, depending on the environment that I'm in. But today we're talking about how the 8 shows up under stress, which is 8 traveling towards the 5, the investigator. So between integration and disintegration, we're going to stay heavily in the disintegration or lacking authenticity or showing up under stress for the 8, which travels more towards the 5. And this is the crown of the Enneagram. It's a helpful visual tool on how each personality type on the Enneagram is fluid and it floats from one type to the other. So, in descriptive words, the type 8 shows up in their shadow when they are defying any attempt to control them, become completely ruthless, dictatorial, might makes right, the criminal and outlaw, renegade, and con artist, hard-headed, immoral, and potentially violent. Level 8, develop delusional ideas about their power, invincibility, and ability to prevail. Megalomania, feeling omnipotent, invulnerable, recklessly overextending self. And finally, at their worst, if they get in danger, they may brutally destroy everything that has not conformed to their will rather than surrender to anyone else. Vengeful, barbaric, murderous, sociopathic tendencies generally corresponds to antisocial personality disorder. Now, a lot of times in my life, I don't resonate with these three descriptors, but they are helpful in providing that mirror and the reflection for me as a type 8 to understand when I'm going to a place of stress. When I'm not showing up authentically, I will show up quite like this. These are the worst parts of the 5, the investigator. But how they actually show up, the Enneagram Type 8, just briefly at their best, compassionate, inspiring, direct, resilient, loyal, energetic, empowering, protective, self-confident. But today we're talking about the shadow, where we are loud, vengeful, excessive, controlling, rebellious, insensitive, domineering, self-centered, and skeptical, right? And I'm going to provide a reflection for you of how I've shown up in the past 6 months to give us a glimpse into how the shadow can be seen from an outside loved one, coworker, somebody you view on the media who shows up like the 8 at their worst. Can you think of anybody right now in America or in the world that is loud, vengeful, excessive, controlling, rebellious, insensitive, domineering, self-centered, and skeptical? A few come to mind, but the beauty of the Enneagram is that we're not going to project onto anyone, oh, you're just such an 8, right? You're only doing that because you're an 8 under stress. That's not how the tool is used to its most effective benefit, right? We provide each other with a reflection and a mirror, and we hold that up for others to see by showing up as our authentic selves. Right. And when we show up authentically, sometimes it tends to rub people the wrong way. And that's when conflict shows up. And then that's why I teach people in our weekly group calls how to navigate conflict safely, effectively, and compassionately. Now, again, when the 8 shows up at their best, they tend to be a lot like the Enneagram 2, loving, compassionate, adaptable, nurturing, generous, supportive, hospitable, tuned into how people feel. But why I share this meme right here, this image, is that, again, when the type 2 is showing up as their worst, they go towards the worst part of the 8. Again, these descriptors right here. So the reflection in the mirror that the type 8 gets from the worst part of the 2 is the worst part of themselves. So if a 2 and an 8 are in a relationship and the 2 is under stress, they're not showing up authentically, which is the path to growth for the type 2, then the 8 is going to take that very personally. They're going to feel as if it's like controlling or a betrayal, and they end up in a lot of conflict. And that's why the Enneagram is such a great relationship tool, because when the 2 is showing up as intrusive, martyr-like, indirect, manipulative, possessive, flatter, needy, overly accommodating, that reflects back to the type 8 that this is the worst part of me. And I don't like spending time with a type 2 when they're under stress or when they're not authentic or when they're showing up disintegrated, because it reflects back to me my worst self, right? So, how the Enneagram shows up under stress. We become more like the type 5, the investigator. The normally bold and brave type 8 becomes withdrawn and reserved. They take less action and become focused on attaining more information that they seemingly don't need about anything. Signs of stress for the 8: overconsumption of news, articles, and social media. You feel stuck in your head and a sense of brain fog. Compassion seems impossible. You feel like you need to be more controlling of others. Working with others sounds like your worst nightmare, right? Physical body feels restless and stiff. Now, I will provide a reflection for my type 8s out there who have gotten this far into this video, because I know it can be confronting. But my worst version of myself could have potentially shown up in the last 6 months. Buying a house was a huge risk, put me at a lot of vulnerable places financially, and then also taking on such a big adventure with my partner. Last week, I talked about how that might actually show up with my wings. This week, it could have potentially derailed me because of how vulnerable I felt by taking on such a large financial responsibility in buying a house. However, what I chose to do about it was take action, right? I saw the impending election coming up in 2024. I saw the two candidates. I saw the economic impact of one candidate over the other when it comes down to us buying this home. Now, yeah, did I overly consume news and articles and social media during that time? Absolutely. Was I trending towards the 5 by gathering up all of this information by going to independent left-wing media, right-wing media, and neutral, if you can even find that these days? I found news articles and social media to inform my own opinion. And I decided to take action on TikTok, right? I shared hundreds of videos over the last 6 or 7 months pointing out how candidate A had economically impactful policies that they were campaigning on that could actually impact my own world and the interest rate and the mortgage and the value of my home. So I decided to take action. That's where the signs of stress actually empower an 8 to stand up for the little guy. You might also see on TikTok that I discuss abortion rights and healthcare a lot, as much as the economy, because I'm standing up for some people who cannot stand up for themselves, who, from my place of privilege, being a white man in America, they're not impacting me personally, but I'm standing up for those people who it does, right? So this is the difference. This is the nuance and the fluidity of the Enneagram 8. I can go to a place of over-consuming news, articles, and social media. But what do I do with that? Do I withdraw? And do I become reserved and stay in my rabbit hole on YouTube and the internet and social media? No, I take action. And that's a huge difference. I did not feel stuck in my head and a sense of brain fog, except for the week after November 5th. Yes, I was in a place of grief. I was grieving and I was in denial and I was in anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance all at the same time, because we were grieving a worldview that we thought we were losing, right? The difference on number 3 here is that compassion did not seem impossible for me during this phase of my life. I was able to show up for my partner much more like the 2: loving, compassionate, adaptable, nurturing, generous, supportive, hospitable, tuned into how other people feel. We had her 2 daughters, or her daughter, her partner, and her grandson living with us for a couple months during that time frame. Hospitable, supportive. I didn't push back on that. We did push back on the length of time eventually, but for the well-being of her daughter, daughter's partner and their grandson, absolutely, we were supportive of what they needed at that time. We're very generous. I was able to remain nurturing to my partner who was going through a lot more grief than I was. Was I adaptable? Absolutely. Compromise is a huge part of relationship and a huge part of home ownership. And I could do that lovingly and compassionately with my partner as she definitely was going through her range of emotions post-election 2024. And then you feel like you need to be more controlling of others. Absolutely, I could totally see how this would show up, but it only showed up on social media of like controlling the content or the comments that were placed on my videos. That's more of a discernment of what kind of language and what kind of energy I wanted to bring into my world. That's not controlling others. That's controlling my peace. That is protecting my peace. And again, how the eight sometimes shows up is they do not want to feel controlled. They do not want to feel vulnerable. So if I'm moderating the comments in my TikTok videos, I'm protecting my peace, not controlling others and the way that they think. I'm putting myself out there with the understanding and the information and the knowledge I gained from over consuming news articles and social media. Yes, but I'm not controlling others with it. I'm not putting out misinformation so that people could be swayed or to change their mind. It's to inform them and to open up and challenge the way that they think. And I'm using TikTok as a tool in order to do that. Number 5, working with others sounds like your worst nightmare. Absolutely not. I started a new job within the last year. I worked and compromised with my partner on where we were going to live in this new home. We moved an hour away. That was a big compromise working with my partner, right? I also joined a new jujitsu gym, which means that I have to work with others in a physically intimate, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually intimate environment, right? And I choose to be in that environment because I'm working with others. We have to have trust, we have to have vulnerability, and we have to have a safe space where we can work together. So it didn't sound like my worst nightmare. I would have worked on a lot of collaboration with a lot of people who were to have reached out on TikTok. If they had so, I would have definitely worked with others in order to have generative discourse on our political differences, right? And even so, when I see somebody have a different political viewpoint than myself, I don't immediately dismiss them. I ask questions, I dig deeper. I come from a place of desiring understanding right now instead of just, nope, that's not my truth, so it's not the truth, right? And then how number 6, my physical body feels restless and stiff. No, I was actually sleeping very well. I was showing up very relaxed and responsive, not reactive. So this is how the mirror and the reflection of the Enneagram can help us understand our shadow better. Had I let myself slip down this slippery slope of deep into the YouTube rabbit hole, I don't spend too much time on YouTube, but I do on TikTok. And I go to places like Brian Tyler Cohen, and I go to places like Aaron Parnas, and I go to places like Midas Touch, who are not browbeating their ideology into my brain. However, they are informing us with a new lens and a new perspective from left of center, right? So no, I was not reactive. Sometimes there's a reaction that shows up, but there's a difference between reaction and responding. Viktor Frankl says the space between a stimulus and response is our opportunity for growth. So when politics and relationships and our sports teams show up and we want to defend them to our core, our opportunity is to reflect that these emotions come from our amygdala, our lizard brain, our caveman brain. And the opportunity between stimulus or the space between stimulus and response is our opportunity for growth. So sit in that space. Don't rush towards a reaction. Sit with your feelings, your emotions, and your experience until you're ready to respond. And then let's talk about next week. Next week, we're going to talk about how the Enneagram can help improve your relationships. This is the tool that I use to improve my relationships over the last 5 or 6 years. Some have left, rightfully so. I definitely have put some relationships behind me based on how I show up authentically in the world. And I use the Enneagram as a tool to reflect on how I went about selecting future relationships, including my current partnership. So let's do a check-in. I want you to reach out. I want you to comment here on YouTube. I want you to reach out on social media at Dave Glaser on TikTok, at Coach Dave Glaser on Instagram, and tell me how you're feeling. What reflection and mirror did I hold up for you today through the lens of the Enneagram? The type 8 can oftentimes get like abrasive and like, whoa, that is not me. I'm going to close off. I'm going to shut down. That is not what I want you to do today. I want you to reach out to somebody that you trust, somebody that you're okay with being vulnerable, and tell them how you're feeling about what you learned today. That person can be me. That person can be your partner. That person can be your therapist. I'm all for it. Just I challenge you to reach out. If you're looking for a little bit more support in your dating and relationship journey right now, connect with me for our weekly men's and women's groups where we talk about the Enneagram, how we show up authentically and inauthentically, and what we can do about it to improve our relationships. Again, this is Dave Glaser in Colorado, wishing you health and happiness wherever you're at in the world. I'll talk to you soon.